Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have taken place around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Migrant storm continues to sweep Europe. They come in hordes despite perilous journey across sea and land. The crisis has polarized and confounded the EU that's struggling to come up with a coordinated policy. Yemen stares at a humanitarian disaster as months of civil war rips into malnutrition figures and livelihoods. Multiple players vie for control of a poor but strategically located country. Ukraine forces and alleged Russia-backed rebels agreed to enforce a 6-month-old ceasefire pact as schools reopen. Wider efforts on to implement the Minsk agreement. China celebrates the 70th anniversary of the World War II victory against Japan. A mega parade held in Tiananmen Square in the presence of the world's who's who. And Wales and Iceland both just one win away from qualifying for the 2016 UEFA European Championships. Victories in their next games will be a major step forward for both the European minnows. Well, our top focus again this week, the continuing storm sweeping across Europe. A massive wave of migrants from the Middle East and North Africa desperate to make it first over the Mediterranean Sea and then by land through several countries to West Europe. It's a perilous journey taking on nature and several governments and police forces. The migration crisis has polarized and confounded the EU that's struggling to come up with a coordinated policy. Here's a detailed report.
Chaos and confusion at Budapest railway station after doors that had been shut to migrants were opened on Thursday. What these desperate migrants didn't know was that trains to Europe remained suspended.
We didn't use the flag of Germany and we just let enter. So it's not going to Germany.
The blockade of sorts by Hungarian authorities to stop migrants pushing into Europe has been on since Tuesday. The refugees themselves agitating vociferously against the move. Keleti station has become the latest focal point for European tensions over an unrelenting flow of migrants from the Middle East, Asia and Africa to West Europe.
We are really here in a jail and we can't go anywhere because the police is really, you can't find them anywhere. And maybe will catch you and take you and maybe they do anything with you.
This image, the dead body of a toddler washed ashore on a Turkish beach, sparked horror in Europe, putting a human face to the dangers the migrants face on their journey. On these choppy waters in flimsy dinghy boats, capsizes and rescue missions have become all too frequent, as have deaths and drownings. Yet they continue to pour in. 1.6 lakh migrants have crossed the Mediterranean Sea into Greece so far this year. More than 4,000 come every day. The figure is expected to cross 3.5 lakhs by the end of 2015. From Greece, they move westwards via Serbia, Macedonia, Hungary and Austria into Germany. That land route towards Germany is a nightmarish adventure in itself, traversing tough terrain on foot, suffocating train journeys, difficult living conditions. Protest demonstrations have often turned violent. As countries close their borders to check these migrants getting through, clashes frequently break out. Confusion persists on EU policy on treatment of the migrants. Law and order is a frequent casualty.
First step is to re-establish law and order at the borders of the European Union. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The European Union, including Hungary, should regain its ability to differentiate between refugees proper and economic migrants. Obviously, it's the best interest of those arriving, actually, that they have papers, and we will be able to establish whether they are coming from Syria, or they are coming from other war zones, or they are coming with a different intent, that is, they are economic migrants.
Nearly 1.25 lakh migrants have reached Munich, provided registration and sanctuary. This goes against laws known as Dublin rules, wherein the refugees are to be registered at EU entry points, namely Greece, Italy and Hungary. the grouping has yet to formulate a definite policy.
Deshalb glaube ich, sollten wir jetzt daran arbeiten, eine gemeinsame Asylpolitik hinzubekommen, genauso wie wir das mit Spanien auch besprochen haben, und nicht uns gegenseitig jetzt zu bezichtigen, sondern wir müssen etwas ändern. Und dazu gehören diese Hotspots, die bereits beschlossen sind, die müssen schnell errichtet werden als Registrierungszentren. Das muss von der EU gemeinsam betrieben werden. Dazu gehören die sicheren Herkunftsländer.
Italy, France and Germany have signed a joint document calling for a review of current European Union rules on granting asylum and a fair distribution of migrants within the EU. A bigger meet on the crisis has been scheduled for the 14th of September. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is former diplomat Shiv Shankar Mukherjee. Ambassador, thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Ambassador, you know, at least over the last few days, we've seen that some of the European countries have come out and said that, you know, they need to do something as far as this problem is concerned. But do you think enough is being done? And the problem really is there's no real consensus as far as the European Union itself is concerned to tackle the migrant crisis, isn't it?
Well, absolutely right. I mean, this crisis has really... there's always been a problem with regard to immigration as far as the politics of Europe is concerned. You'll remember the rise of the right-wing parties, the UK Independence Party, the Le Pen, France, and so on. And they fall on fertile ground in European countries where the emotions are whipped up on the grounds that these are immigrants who will take away our jobs at a time when growth is not that high, unemployment is pervasive. These are immigrants who will take away our jobs. We will need to spend our money on them, and that will add to our financial woes. And more often than not, even more importantly, but not often stated, is the background of, shall I say, racism combined with an insular thought that because most of the refugees are traditionally blacks from Africa, and today the crisis, which is the refugees flowing in from conflict zones in the Middle East, are Muslims. So all three put together create that kind of opinion which Europe is trying to really battle, as you heard from Angela Merkel, because Europe is equally, if not much more, bothered. They are, after all, enlightened governments in many ways. They are very conscious of Europe's image as a liberal continent, Indeed. The European Union as a haven for democracy, human rights particularly, because they are among the most vocal proponents of human rights, and treating the refugees badly or pushing them back or putting up physical barriers to prevent them from coming in and letting them drown in the sea or whatever, would destroy that image, and so they are very conscious of that. So this is the dilemma they face.
But some countries like Germany, like you mentioned, Germany as well as UK and some of the other countries, of course, have decided to take on this issue and then, do something about it. But then there are the others, for instance, Hungary, Finland, Sweden. Quite right. Who are not at all concerned. They're very indifferent.
Sweden is, in fact, per capita wise, if you take ratio of population to refugees, Sweden has come up #1, actually.
But Hungary and Finland are...
No, most of the other countries, it's at different levels. Greece and Italy are extremely worried. They are the entry points. And under the Dublin rules, all the refugees have to be registered and given asylum, or not, as the case may be, but registered in where the refugees, migrants actually, enter the EU, which is mostly Italy and Greece, and now Hungary, which is more of a staging point. Now, the thing is, the process of granting asylum is not overnight. This is one detail that most people don't know. It takes months. And after months of staying there as a sort of a stateless person, most of them, in any case, won't go back. So you're stuck with them. What the Hungarian interlocutor just said on the TV report, that Europe must regain its ability to distinguish between genuine refugees and political refugees fleeing from conflict zones and economic refugees, was a distinction drawn in the earlier days, but it won't fudge now, because if that happens, this is another major dimension. If that happens, then you have to have border controls to check that.
Yes.
And the border controls will hit at the heart of the attempts to create a genuine European Union through, for instance, the Schengen arrangement. That is, once you enter the European Union, there are no borders for goods, services, and people. So Europe now has got to put all these very difficult strands together and work out some kind of compromise acceptable to the components of the European Union. It's not going to be easy. The interior ministers are meeting on the 14th. I believe the Council of Europe, which is the foreign ministers, to examine all the political and overall angles, will meet on the 16th. Every compromise, I think, will be somewhat clumsy, but it'll have to be a compromise. And I personally feel the way the thing is exploding with no end to the conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere, which are the source of the refugees influx, I think a certain creeping emergence of border controls is going to happen. Finally, the large numbers that Germany says it will take, but saying only Syrians, which is a political statement against the Bashar Assad government, in a sense. But let us face two things. Number one, they are talking of hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
Jordan, Turkey, various others, India in the old days, 10 million refugees. The poor developing countries in West Asia, countries like Jordan, are actually having to deal with multiple times more refugees. So it doesn't really behove Europe to talk about, the sacrifices they're making and maintaining their humane image. Secondly, and this must be said, the real cause, one of the most important causes of the fact that these refugees are fleeing from conflict zones, the conflicts have been caused by actions from the West. In Libya, in Iraq, and so on. I'm not even talking of colonization. I'm talking of the politics of the recent decade and 2 decades. These have, the West has stormed in and walked out, leaving behind destruction and total destabilization in their wake. So they bear a very strong moral responsibility and they can't escape it.
Indeed. All right, Ambassador, we'll have to leave it to that. Thank you so much for putting things into perspective for us as far as the major European immigrant crisis is concerned.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, of course, we'll slip into a short break now. But on the other side, another Boko Haram horror in Nigeria. Terrorists move from village to village on horseback, shooting randomly. That and lots more coming up. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, Yemen is in the throes of multiple layers of civil war, with the security and humanitarian situation in the country at an all-time low. Early this week, a coalition of Gulf and North African nations bombarded what is suspected was an arms manufacturing unit, killing at least 35 civilians. Such attacks are almost commonplace in the country, ripped apart by months of infighting, compounded by selfish external interventions. Here's more.
This structure used to be a bottling unit, one of the few that stood in Hajar province of war-ravaged North Yemen, till the Saudi-led coalition of Gulf Arab states decided this was a Houthi arms unit that had to go. All 36 of those killed in the bombing were civilians.
خرجنا شفنا وين انه استهداف مدني استهداف ما حتى ولا اي واحد هنا من المستهدفين استهداف مدني مواطنين كلهم.
Another of many incidents of gruesome civilian killings amid unending gunfire, airstrikes and a perpetual state of fear. Last week it was Hodeidah, a key port town held by the Houthis. Airstrikes there had hit a local school, women and children among the casualties. The latest battleground is Taiz in central Yemen, a violence and destruction-filled fight for supremacy between Houthi rebels who had taken the city and militia loyal to deposed Prime Minister Hadi looking to win it back. The war is between these two fronts, at least primarily. The northern-based Houthis, a Shia Muslim group, took control of Yemen's capital Sana'a from Hadi last September. A coalition of 5 Arab and North African countries intervened in the conflict in March to halt a Houthi advance into the south. Months of airstrikes and arms deliveries by the rich Gulf states to government loyalists has resulted in the recapture of Aden. Besides pro-Hadi fighters, Houthis and coalition of Gulf states, there's also the Al-Qaeda in Arabian Peninsula, the Aqab terror group and Islamic State militants fighting each other in battleground Yemen. Yemen is strategically important because it sits on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow waterway linking the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden, through which much of the world's oil shipments pass. All this mayhem going back 5 months. 20 out of 22 districts in the grip of continuous fighting has played havoc with the humanitarian situation. Over 4,000 dead, civilians badly hit, millions displaced, food stocks at all-time lows. Getting in aid has proved a stop-and-start process, with efforts non-governmental relief agencies falling short of needs. The United Nations ceasefire efforts have been virtual non-starters. Its humanitarian relief arm has expressed strong concern.
The civilian population is bearing the brunt of the conflict. A shocking 4 out of 5 Yemenis require humanitarian assistance, and nearly 1.5 million people are internally displaced. More than 1,000 children have been killed or injured, and the number of young people recruited or used as fighters is increasing.
Even before this crisis began, Yemen had one of the highest malnutrition rates in the entire world. What we're seeing now is an increase in the number of severe malnutrition cases because of lack of access of our program operators to provide the support that is necessary.
Instability and large-scale displacement, as well as weak governance, corruption, resource depletion and poor infrastructure have hindered development in the poorest country in the Middle East. Like many other of the world's strategically located countries, Yemen too is in a sinking mode. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's take a look now at some other events that made headlines across the world this past week in our segment Globe Watch.
Suspected Boko Haram gunmen on horseback shot dead nearly 80 people in attacks on 3 villages in Nigeria's restive northeast on Sunday. The attacks were the latest bloodbath in the 6-year-old insurgency by the extremist group. Reports say the groups of attackers visited several villages and opened sporadic gunfire at people, including worshippers at mosques, at marketplaces and public areas. An 8,700-strong multinational joint task force drawing in Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon and Benin is expected to deploy against the insurgents very soon. 2 weeks after explosions in a toxic chemical warehouse in Tianjin, China, the death toll is up to 158, with 15 people still missing. The dead include 94 firefighters, 11 policemen and 53 civilians. The missing include 10 firefighters and 5 civilians. More than 300 primary and middle schools in the area opened for the new semester on Monday as scheduled. As per the latest reports, no excessive levels of pollutants were found in the air outside the exclusion zone, but high levels of cyanide were detected from water samples from inside the exclusion zone. Turkey's parliament voted on Thursday to extend a mandate authorizing deployment of troops to Syria and Iraq by a year. This comes weeks after it stepped up its role in the US-led coalition fighting the Islamic State. The NATO member opened its air bases to coalition fighter jets in July and has since taken part in joint strikes for the first time. With this, Turkey ended years of reluctance to take a frontline role against the Islamic State. Guatemalan President Otto Perez Molina resigned on corruption charges on Wednesday. Molina is to be held in prison while hearings take place over his alleged role in a massive bribery and fraud case. Thousands of protesters flooded the streets of the capital and other cities in recent weeks, calling for Perez to step down over allegations he was involved in a customs racket. Vice President Alejandro Maldonado has been sworn in as interim head of state ahead of elections on Sunday.
Well, let's shift focus now to East Ukraine. Fighting has continued here between the Ukrainian army and suspected Russia-backed rebels, despite a ceasefire deal and signing of the Minsk agreement to resolve issues. Efforts to implement a section of the Minsk agreement came up against roadblocks in Kiev this week, even as both sides finally agreed to honor the thus far rickety truce.
Ultimately, it'll be for them. Peace for their sake. Schools reopened in Ukraine on Tuesday, and warring Ukrainian soldiers and rebels finally decided to enforce a ceasefire they agreed on 6 months back. Only the worrying echoes persist.
It is still rather dangerous for people to stay in some districts. And also just a week ago, we were sitting at home during shelling and thinking whether it would reach us or not, though a child thought it was fireworks, but it was not.
Just a day earlier, on Monday, another gathering. Quite another mood. Protesters rallied outside the parliament in Kiev as it prepared to vote on constitutional changes to give Ukraine's eastern regions a special status as per the Minsk agreement. Banners proclaimed anger at what's seen as an attempt to split the country. Demonstrators felt decentralization would allow the East to establish closer ties with Russia. Inside the house too, ruckus prevailed as the government justified autonomy to rebel-held areas. Many of the opposing groups in the debate belong to the ruling coalition. In the end, the special status motion did go through Parliament. 265 voted for the move, 39 more than needed. The Ukrainian president hailed it as his country keeping its word on the Minsk agreement.
We want to demonstrate to the whole world and to the whole pro-Ukrainian coalition that Ukraine is very responsible to implement all the obligations we signed in February in Minsk. On contrary, Russia do not do anything. And that's why it would be absolutely clear picture for the whole world.
But outside, things were heating up. The protests by nationalist groups turned into clashes with police as Parliament passed the amendment. Violence turned ugly. Firecrackers and smoke bombs flew. And then this. A live grenade hurled by a protester killed a National Guardsman and injured over 120 others. The area strewn with blood and shells of smoke bombs. One more guard died later. The protests highlight just how tough Kiev will find getting the motion through in another vote later this year, even as the leadership slammed protesting parties this time.
Cynicism of this crime also lies in the fact that while the Russian Federation and its bandits are trying to destroy Ukrainian state and are failing to do so at the front in the east, these so-called pro-Ukrainian political forces are trying to open a second front in the center of the country.
It's not as if Ukraine has eased off completely on Russia. Naval exercises were held with the United States this week. The cabinet approved a military doctrine that for the first time identifies Russia as the enemy and the aggressor. A complete easing of tension is clearly some way away yet. But at least there's a start. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's shift focus now and bring you up to speed with some big events from sporting arenas around the world this week in our segment Sports Action.
Gareth Bale proved Wales' saviour once again as his thunderous late header gave them a 1-0 win in Cyprus to put them on the brink of qualifying for Euro 2016. Wales midfielder David Edwards had a goal disallowed and Neil Taylor wasted a fine chance as a full-blooded first half ended goalless. Wales remain unbeaten and 3 points clear at the top of Group B, knowing victory against Israel on Sunday will seal qualification and end a 58-year wait for an appearance at a major tournament. The Netherlands' hope of automatic qualification for Euro 2016 took a huge blow as Gylfi Sigurdsson's penalty gave Iceland a 1-0 win in Amsterdam. The Netherlands are third in Group A, 6 points behind Czech Republic and another 2 of group leaders Iceland. Iceland, who have never reached a major tournament finals before, are top with 18 points. Iceland can guarantee their place at Euro 2016 with a home win over Kazakhstan on Sunday. Sri Lanka's head coach Marwan Atapattu has resigned after less than a year in charge following the team's home test series defeat by India. His resignation was accepted by the Sri Lankan Cricket Board. Neither the board nor Atapattu has offered a reason for the decision. Former skipper Atapattu was appointed in October 2014 after 6 months as interim coach, where he led Sri Lanka to a series win over England.
And finally, China held a grand military parade in Beijing on Thursday to commemorate the 70th anniversary of its victory against Japanese aggression in World War II. A total of 24 heads of state and governments, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and South Korean President Park Geun-hye, attended the event. Besides representatives of 19 countries, heads of 10 international organizations, including the UN, and 6 former foreign leaders. A 70-gun salute from 50 guns, a guard of honor, and a grand parade with about 1,000 troops from 17 countries participated. The first time foreign troops have been invited to a military parade in China. I'll leave you today with some more grand images of this landmark occasion. See you again next time.